Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 trillion. Today we have a very special guest. His name is David Hartmann, the Senior Vice President at Growth Ventures at Covestro. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
So it's a pleasure to have you on the show. You are also 12 or 16 weeks ahead of us, as you are based in Shanghai. We are in a very special context with the world in lockdown given the pandemic crisis. And something that is also very interesting about you, David, is that you have been a founder, a CEO. You've been working also in a large corporate during all those years. And you are also helping your own portfolio of startups and scale-ups to thrive. So you almost cover all the dimensions, all the tables that we usually have in the show in just one person, which is quite amazing. But better than myself introducing yourself, it would be great to get to know more about yourself before we move forward.
Thanks for the introduction. My name is David Hartmann, as you already said. I'm within Covestro, which is one of the world's top materials companies, particularly in engineering plastics, polycarbonates, but also foams, polyurethanes. And I run, as you said, a portfolio of ventures within that business. I'm based in Shanghai, so around me is, you can't see it here, but around me is Shanghai. We're right on the Huangpu River here. It's a beautiful day. And it's pretty safe here. I mean, we're in a pretty normal environment. Everybody's wearing masks when they go out on the street or when they interact with colleagues. But I think important to say, wherever you are in the world, as we just heard, we're 16 weeks or so ahead of the rest of the world, and life here is really good and normal. And I think that's a very reassuring thing. What that means, though, is that over the last couple of months, my team and I and the people that I work with have kind of experienced, what it's like to go through this process of fear and then going through how do you run a business and how do you make sure your family is safe during that difficult time. And for me, it's been a challenging couple of months, effectively being exiled from China for a while. We were in Malaysia when the whole crisis hit, and then coming back to China. From my side, I run 7 different businesses of various sizes. And our goal is really, we understand that our customers in those businesses are going through a lot of questions about, they know what today is and they know what the tomorrow might look like, but they don't know how to bridge that. And from a materials perspective, we work with them to help them understand what material options, what need options they need to fulfill in order to get to that future. And then that could be everything from aesthetic support with color and design. That could be mechanical support. That could be also cooperation partnerships and research partnerships or business implementation partnerships. So it keeps us pretty active. We have around 150 to 200 people around the world in different teams. So we also have now seen what that means under these challenging times.
Got it. That's amazing. And to give just an idea to the audience about the scale of Covestro, if I'm not wrong, if I studied well, Covestro, it was in the past Bayer Material Science. Then it was completely separated from Bayer as an independent entity. Today is also listed in the DAX stock, and we are talking about revenues at the north of 13 billion euros, which is an amazing scale just for the audience to have an understanding about the size of Covestro. Cool. And going to the critical ingredients that we always cover on the show, radical focus, world-class leadership, and the culture of execution. In terms of radical focus, as you said, and I think it's very well stated, it's easy to keep the vision ahead of us, or it's already a good step to be able to remember still the vision that we want to achieve in the mid-long term. In the short term, we might be a little bit still in shock, depending in what stage we are in the business and in what part of the world we are now. But it's really that next 12 to 18 months that it's difficult to define, and that's why it's so difficult to redefine priorities, to redefine OKRs. I know that you are also an enthusiastic about the OKR methodology. So how do you define, how do you help your ventures, and how do you define also by yourself priorities in such an uncertain scenario, or with so many scenarios possible in the next 18 months?
Well, I think critical is really two things here, right? One is people and one is customers, and our people and how we make sure that they stay calm, how we make sure that they feel secure in order to do the best by the customers. I really think that's the main thing. And there's been a lot written, a lot of talk about empathy, right? And I think as a leader, the important thing is at this point that we have huge amount of empathy, and that we veer on the side of generosity when we have empathy for our team members, because there's no standard at the moment, right? Everybody is in different situations. Right. Somebody stuck at home with kids is in a totally different situation to, Absolutely. Let's say, a young professional worrying about their parents or their grandparents, right? So we have to have that empathy in order to adjust. What we use a lot in my team is we think a lot in barbell strategies. And that's something that Nassim Nicholas Taleb talks about, where instead of putting all your eggs in one medium risk basket, you kind of separate into a large chunk of very low risk and a smaller chunk of extremely high risk. And we think about our time and our priorities in that way. So if you think about a master craftsman, right, they would not scurry around doing a million tasks at the same time. They'd maybe look at a system and touch one or two things and get a massive result, right? And that's what I'm looking for my team. I don't want them to look busy. I really want them to exercise their craft, right? And we do that a lot, thinking about that with barbell strategies. Another thing that we do a lot is there's a lot of wishful thinking in business, right? And I think the emphasis for me is I don't mind mistakes. I think it's totally cool to make mistakes, even sometimes the same mistake twice. But I do mind when we lie to ourselves about what the reality on the ground is. And I think Ray Dalio talks about that really well, right? What is your ground truth? It doesn't mean you can't have ambitious goals or dreams, but what is that ground truth? And especially now, you know, there's a lot of ground truths that are being challenged, and a lot of opportunity to lie to ourselves about what's really going on, what's Absolutely. Really going on with our teams, what's really going on in the market. And then that's something we should avoid at all costs. And then I think the last thing from my side is I really focus on our longer term vision hasn't changed. Even if we can only do small things in that direction, like reach out to even just minor customers and say, hey, is there any way we can help you during this time, right? That's important. The risk is that we get paralyzed and that we see, oh, it's fear paralysis. We're in this horrible situation. We can't do anything. That's not true. We can. The longer term vision hasn't changed. Let's keep moving in that direction. So that's the thing. I think as a leader, and I don't think I'm there yet, right? So I'm not saying that I'm capable of that, but I think ultimately we want to be people that kind of emit this huge sense of calm. Because that's contagious, right? And Absolutely. When we emit a sense of fear or agitation, that's also contagious, yeah? So I hope my teams get the impression that I'm calm, settled, and I'm there as a servant to them, not as somebody who's more scared or more worried or more agitated. Not saying I succeed always.
Absolutely. And it's curious, it's difficult also to find the balance between not being fake, being real, and being vulnerable, but at the same time, do not be so real and so vulnerable that, as you said, we are not only panicking ourselves, but also making all our team panicking, which is a pity.
Yeah, look, I think authenticity and vulnerability are always okay. And anybody who takes advantage of that, well, you probably don't want to spend too much time with those people anyway, right? But there's a difference between vulnerability and panic, right? I'm totally
Absolutely.
okay admitting to my team that I'm scared, right? I mean, my family has been through some tough months the last few months, and there were times when I was really scared for my family, and I was totally okay to discuss that with my team. But I hope that they could see that fear did not translate into me panicking and losing my head and losing a sense of
Correct.
direction, right? And that's
Correct.
the difference.
Correct. That's an amazing one. So and moving to the next component, a world-class leadership, which is also related about what we are discussing now. So it's all about keeping the vision alive, saying that we keep walking in the same direction. Our vision is exactly the same. This is just an obstacle that we were not expecting. It will get us stronger, and everything will be okay, and we will get there without, as you said, without lying to ourselves and seeing that the reality is really challenging, and but having also the conviction that we will get through this, and as a team we are able to attack this and get even stronger out of this. Something very interesting that we discussed in a previous conversation is this difference between wartime and peacetime, and sometimes the teams behave in a different way in wartime and peacetime. Leaders also behave in a different way. There are leaders, typically entrepreneurs, that even in peacetime inside their companies are in wartime, so they are very comfortable with wartime. And you were commenting that in China, it's always wartime because it's so competitive. But comment a little bit more about this. So how do you structure your team for a wartime scenario, and how to assure that we have the right people on the right seats to face the challenge that we are facing today?
Yeah, I think this wartime, peacetime discussion, as you said, we had it a few days ago. I think that's hugely exciting. And I think there's kind of an implicit value attached, right? That somehow the skills in wartime are more highly prized than the skills in peacetime. So I don't think it's that way at all, right? I think that, yes, there are certain skills that are needed, but both are equally complex, right? If you're in peacetime, you want to be behaving in a way much more sensitively, then you need to be much more alert to when you make moves in the market, when you work with your team, when you attack new projects, what kind of feedback you're getting. And in Asia, I think it's just a fact, certainly in our industry, and I think in many other industries, downstream and otherwise, the Asian competitive environment has always been much, much more complex, right? Whereas you might have a handful or 10 competitors in the US or in Europe, here you might be faced with 30, 40 competitors, and
Right.
each of them extremely hungry and with very little history, right? So little history means there are no industry norms, right? There's no, oh, we did that 30 years ago, that's why we don't do that today. They just don't have that, right? And I think from a leadership perspective, that means that as wartime leaders in Asia, we're much more likely to try new things out, just because that's what the competitive environment demands, right? And we have to move at a much, much faster iteration cycle speed, right? And maybe that's then the link to entrepreneurship, right? That entrepreneurs are very used to having an extremely fast iteration speed because they just can't afford not to. There's no money available to wait for ages during an iteration, right? What I would say though is the best wartime leaders that I've seen are ones that are very clear on their values. Because when you're at wartime and when things are very competitive, it's very tempting to step out of your value zone. And I don't care what your values are, right? I know what mine are. I know what the organization I work for has as values. And I would not step out of them because I would consider it, it would be inauthentic, and B, it would be short-sighted, right? So I don't think wartime is a call to results at any cost.
Right.
In fact, in the contrary, I think you lose people very fast if you betray the values on the basis of which you recruited them and motivated them, right?
Absolutely. Something that interesting that you said in when we were discussing radical focus is, and this is also about world-class leadership, is having the courage to be unpopular, which is we tend to lie to ourselves during these stages. So this is not a moment to talk to our customers. We will completely lose the next 2 quarters. And as you said, there is always something that we can do to move forward.
Yeah.
It's, as you said, it can be that maybe some of those clients also have a little bit more time to discuss the future, and they will appreciate to have this brainstorming about the future, or even to share some knowledge about your relationships and your access to information across your network to let them know a little bit more about how looks the context. Imagine that you are in a group like yours with providers and customers in Europe, and you can provide this context that you are living in China and trying to anticipate what will be going on there. It can add value. So how do you inspire people, as you said before, to not lie to themselves and to not avoid action, but at the same time to not move to action without having a clear understanding about what they will do? So what I mean is not doing just by doing, but by doing something that is deliberately will move us forward in the direction of the vision.
I think, you and I discussed last time the topic about culture of execution, right? And how you build up a rhythm, right? And I think that's very important. What we've got at the moment is a situation where people tend to have a day-to-day routine, a rhythm in their lives, right? Whether it's, I'm going to visit 5 customers in a week or whatever it is, right? I'm going to come into the office 8 a.m. in the morning. I'm going to see these people. And now all of a sudden that's gone, right? Their rhythm, their routine is totally gone. And they're physically not interacting with people anymore. And I think the trick is now to help them think of how they could reevaluate their routines and make them more powerful, right? You mentioned OKRs. I'm a huge fan of OKRs. I think we use them quite effectively in my organization, not to cascade ideas down, but more to get this kind of network effect going. And the advantage with OKRs is that you can, and we have done through this crisis, partially rewritten those OKRs to cope with very rapidly changing situations, right? Whereas if you're working with a yearly planning model, then it's very difficult to tell people, well, your mid-year review is going to look very different than the goals we discussed in January, right? But if you've got an OKR approach, maybe a 6-week kind of approach, we were able to tweak that very quickly. Yeah, I think equally important is having that shared sense of vision and purpose. And I think maybe that's one thing where you look at wartime leaders in history, they have been forced, and the successful ones tend to have been much more capable of communicating where we want to go, not just past this crisis, but in the longer term. And that's something we spend a lot of time in. What do we need to visualize our vision for the future? And it's got to be simple, it's got to be powerful, it's got to be something that people are passionate about. I'm very happy because one of the things that motivates me personally is the whole drive towards circular economy and sustainability. And that's something that, for me is non-negotiable. And even though, of course, we're far away from, everybody in the chemical industry is far away from awesome. But what I see in my colleagues and in my organization and our CEO is really the belief that it's necessary to drive in this direction and actively looking for rational tools to get us there. And that's a vision that I can get behind, but that's also a vision that can be powerfully translated to the teams. I'm just thinking what else during this time. I think the other thing is it depends how you see life and the world, right? And I want my people to think of life in business, maybe also in private, even that's really none of my business, to think of life in terms of infinite opportunities and infinite possibilities, right? To look at this crisis period, yeah, it's shitty. Yeah, we're in trouble. Yes, it hurts.
Right.
But in all this hurt, there is an amazing seed of opportunity, right? And I know that sounds cliched, and maybe it is cliched, but it is something that people can live on day to day, right? And it's something that I try to do with my team as much as possible.
Got it. And going to that last critical ingredient that you already introduced, the culture of execution and using OKRs and using the rituals and the routines to help us move forward. There's something curious that we have discussed it in the previous episodes in this wartime season, which is exactly keeping the same routine on one side, so people feel much safer that they're kind of following the same kind of routine, nothing changes in a certain way. But at the same time, people need much more flows of communication, or as the context is changing a lot. So we are seeing people doing dailies, and they've never applied before a daily. They are doing also weekly all ends with all the team, updating all the company about what is going on every single week, because every single week seems a month or a quarter nowadays. So what are some of the rituals that are being more productive and more useful to you to have everyone on the same page? Especially, I'm not sure, and you can also explore a little bit more about there, if you have people at home as well in Shanghai, or if you are already all of you in the office. So how do you are managing this post the high season of the crisis?
Yeah, maybe just a short comment about on our status. So to begin with, China was very affected, right? And the colleagues in Shanghai were stuck in their offices, and it was a horrible time, right? I mean, it's the time that everybody here is going through, everybody worldwide is going through, but apartments in Shanghai are not big. Certainly, okay, Hong Kong and Japan are probably worse off, but Shanghai is pretty tough, right? And these are usually multiple generations living in a household. It's very, very tough. And then after a while, I think second week of March, everything shifted. And then my teams outside of the US. And it was great. Well, it was horrible, but it was also good because we had seen that period of things getting bad in China, and everybody else was aware, hey, this is what it took in China for us to remain operational as a business and to continue to serve our customers. And for instance, we serve healthcare customers for blood separation, for dialysis. You cannot go down for that, right? If you do not supply, you are directly endangering lives. And I'm glad to say we supplied, and we have the thank you letters from customers. And my teams who worked during that time, they saved lives, right? They were there.
Amazing.
But the advantage was that teams in the US, teams in Europe were already aware, hey, this is what it took. One of our manufacturing sites sent masks to Asia during that time. And when everything de-escalated in Shanghai, that Shanghai team sent masks back, right? So it was extremely dynamic and very cool to see the people. It was beautiful. You talked about having safe environments, and I think that is crucial. You know, we have access to a lot of leadership tools. Some of them don't work, but many of them do work. One of them is fear. You can lead successfully through fear. You can. I've seen it, and you can. But it's effective in the short term. It might even be effective in the midterm. But when people have a choice, that's not the environment they want to work in, right? So I think to get the best out of people, we need to give them safety. And it's not so much physical safety. I think that's more of a given, but rather also emotional safety, the safety to talk about unpopular truths without getting beaten up, right? The safety to have an off day and then not be judged, the safety that nobody's going to gossip about you, right? If you've done something, or even if you haven't, right? But that your personal life remains your personal life, right? And I think that is really, really important. I think if you lead through fear, it will fall apart. When it comes to reestablishing these rhythms, we saw a lot of different behavior. I was just talking to our Southeast Asia team, and they have a Friday night cocktail where everybody gets together on Teams or whatever it is they use, and it kind of shares through that. And we've been able, using those kind of methods, we've been able to have conversations that we wouldn't otherwise be able to have, right? And I notice in general, we have a pretty, I would say a medium hierarchical structure, right? There are definitely flatter organizations, but there are also way more hierarchical organizations. And what I've noticed is during this crisis, a very strong a flattening of the organization, where the people who approach me are approaching just to say, hey, thanks for reaching out, or hey, I'm in trouble here, but they're not doing it through their hierarchy, because it's okay during this crisis time to reach out to anybody, maybe because they think I'm geographically there or whatever, right? And that I really like. That's a new routine that we absolutely need to keep, right?
Absolutely. And these are also times where we see new leaders emerging, all right? So which is also a great opportunity to develop a leadership pipeline that we know it's critical to scale. It's critical to scale startups and scale ups, and it's critical to scale large corporates. So usually the main bottleneck to scale is really having enough leaders to pursue new opportunities and to execute those opportunities. Are you seeing in your context leaders emerging? Is this something that resonates with you during wartime?
I would for sure say yes. I think you see in this wartime who's paralyzed and who's not, who steps up and who doesn't. But I'm hesitant to draw conclusions at this time, right? Because it's what I said before, there's no general rule at the moment, right? There's no norm. So everybody is under pressure in a different way, right? If both of your parents have got the coronavirus,
good point,
and you're worried that your kids will get it, you will step up differently from somebody who's by themselves, right? I guess Absolutely. I'm more looking for how do people empathize, right? Yeah. I don't want people who I don't want a lot of showy kind of, this is what we're doing and it's great. But if I hear that somebody's reached out to help a customer or a colleague, and then not talked about it because that kind of behavior is just totally natural, that for me is leadership, And then I'm super proud and I just want to go and give that person a hug, right? Which I can't do.
Exactly. Right? Not yet.
Not yet, exactly. But it's those kind of things that I think are really crucial. Plus also, there are people who lead awesomely out of very steady routines, and we need those people too, right? That may not fit to the entrepreneurial mode, that may not fit to thing, but we need those people as well. We can't afford to alienate them, right? And I think really successful corporate leaders pull people with them. And of course, at some stage, you have to say, look, this group of people, they're not coming with us. It's fine. They have to find their own way. But I think the best corporate leaders know how to pull different groups of people in the same direction and using different tools, right? That may be different for entrepreneurs, but certainly for corporate leaders, it's important.
Absolutely. And before we close the show with one of our favorite questions, I just wanted to, I'm sure that everyone that is listening the podcast is mainly our main audience is in the West and also in the East across Southeast Asia, but not in China at the moment. So everyone is curious to know what will look like. So nowadays, do you already have more people in the office with you, or do you still have a lot of people working from home? So what is your new normal at this stage in Shanghai?
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, it doesn't go for the production teams, right? I think production has stayed pretty consistently open, and I have, I really have so much respect for those teams, right? I mean, if you're the head of a production site in the chemical industry, you're like the captain of a military vessel, right? And the worst thing that happens to you is your site goes down, right? And you think about it, those people came in during the worst of the crisis when for sure they were scared as hell for their families, and still came in and ran those plants, because you just can't safely shut down chemical plants just like that, right? And then restart them. And for many of our customers, supplying or not supplying to them means life or death for end customers, right? So that's something that yeah, I've never worked in the production and technology organization, but I've worked with a lot of those guys, and yeah, it really excites me to see that kind of morale. For our
Amazing.
teams today in office environments and R&D environments, I think we're 50% back to normal here. I don't know what the exact number is, but it seems to me, at least my teams are 50% working from home, 50% in the office. We all wear, I can show you, we all walk around like this, right? Even in the office, if we're sitting at our desk, we'll take off our mask, but whenever we interact with others, we're in the office. In China, we have a QR code on our phone that says whether we're okay to travel to office locations and so on, or whether we've been in contact with a problematic person or somebody who's been exposed, or whether we actually are at strong risk of being exposed. And depending on that QR code color, then it also defines, are we allowed to go into shopping malls, into office buildings and so on. But apart from that, if I look outside my window in Shanghai, everything is pretty much back to normal. And even though for sure the risk of interacting with other people is still there to a certain extent, but people are really happy to get out of their apartments and come back and have a coffee at work, you know, and it does make a difference.
Because it has been from end of December or beginning of January to almost beginning of March, when everyone
end of January.
End of January.
Yeah.
So it was 8 to 10 weeks, between 8 and 10 weeks, right? So
yeah, so I think people said they've been about 70 days stuck at home.
Yeah, so that's kind of what is the projection in Europe and in the US at this moment, that people will stay part of March, all April and part of May, and then people will come back, you know, in a certain pace, not everyone coming from one day to another at the same time. Cool. Thanks for giving us a little bit more context and giving us light, as you said in the beginning.
But can I add one more thing?
Of course.
I think so. When everybody was exiled at home, I was in Malaysia because we were stuck there during Chinese New Year. We would not have fled China, but by coincidence, for Chinese New Year, we were in Malaysia. My wife is Malaysian, and these families were stuck at home. And the thing that worried me the most is what's going on with the children. How do you explain this to small children? Their parents are scared. And kids pick up on that like crazy, right? But nobody's explaining to them what's going on. And so we would video Skype or using WeChat with the team and kind of walk through a park and say, look, life is normal in other places around the world. There's parks, there's sunshine. And I think that kind of thing made a big difference. But it also gave me a really, really unbelievable level of respect for mothers with their children who are working. I still have in Europe and the US moms who are separated from their husbands. So the husband is working in another location, they can't get together, and the mother works the full time and looks after the kids the full time. And we try and, of course, accommodate that as much as possible. But even with accommodation from the business, I cannot imagine the amount of pressure that these moms are under. And I think for all of the people who are watching this podcast, you know, think hard about your team members who are parents and who are in that situation. And it's very hard to empathize sufficiently. And I think it calls for a special effort.
Absolutely. Hats off for them. It's really impressive, the attitude of amazing heroes that are fighting this pandemic crisis with a lot of courage, because they are also, as you said, they are also scared, they are also facing the fear, but they are choosing to serve all of us and to go through that fear to serve us and to feel also aligned with their values, as you said before. So, which is quite amazing. And we come to the end of the show, and it seems that we would love to stay another hour here discussing. So if you would have the opportunity to meet yourself at the beginning of your journey, at Covestro. What advice would you offer to that David that joined Covestro in the first day?
Yeah, when we were talking about this last time, my son and I, my older son and I, we watch a lot of Mythbusters. For those of you who don't know Mythbusters, American television series focused on testing myths through science. The hosts are Adam Savage and Jamie Heineman. I think they had a 13 or 14-year run, definitely worth checking out with your kids. And one of the hosts, Adam Savage, who's one of the, I would say, leaders in the making community in the US, he wrote in his autobiography that what he would say to his younger self is, you know, when you drill into something with a power drill, you're tempted to apply lots of pressure and go as fast as you can. But actually what you need to do is you need to apply cooling liquid and make sure your drill bit stays cool and really apply power selectively. Yeah? And he said, you know, my recommendation to my younger self is, you know, go slower and apply more cooling fluid, right? And I would say that to myself, you know, instead of trying to do too many things, really figure out the thing that's going to make the difference and apply that more slowly. But I wouldn't want my younger self to change. That's how I got to my current self. And I'm just wondering how I can grow faster and maybe be a bit wiser. Yeah. And that's definitely a suggestion for that.
Amazing show. David, thanks so much for making the time to share your experience and your career with us, and to get us insights also to be prepared for the next 16 weeks. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you. Have a great day. Bye.
And to our community, thanks for being on that side. We keep bringing you the best of the best so you can navigate this pandemic crisis in the best shape possible. And don't forget to keep your vision alive, your values alive, and your mission alive. That's what you need to repeat the most during these war times, so you get stronger to scale up again during peacetime. So see you soon, and stay healthy.